Thank you. I don't usually come across many people that get super excited about holding crucial conversations. And I also don't come across many people that look forward to it. And so when I say you're about to have a crucial conversation, how many of you are clinching on your chairs right now instead of jumping out and saying, "Hey, me, I'd like to hold one"? Not many, I would imagine. So there's a lot that can happen in crucial conversations. Our emotions can take the better half of us. And you and I do these things that undermine the purpose and the intention of why we're there in the first place. It can ruin relationships. It can make things awkward. And so what we could tend to do is we would move to silence, where we stop talking, we stop listening, we play with the iPhone, we may not say anything at all for the entire duration. Or we go into our more aggressive tendencies and we start to self-justify and we talk more than them, we interrupt them, we may raise our voice, we may get frustrated. Now the skill is to learn to look for when these things are happening in me and the other person, because it is changing the direction, the quality, and the texture of the conversation, and ultimately the outcome. And so I've certainly paid the cost in my life by not noticing these cues in some of my conversations. The cues about me when I've moved to my silence tendencies and my more aggressive tendencies. And I've also failed not to really notice what's happening with the other person. And instead what I've done, which you may relate to, I've put my foot on the gas pedal and I've just gone 200 miles an hour beyond that point. And I kept talking, or I just went on with a conversation that was going in a different direction, that was not serving anyone. One of these conversations has been with my dad. So he owns a business in Sydney, Australia, a hospitality business for the last 15 years. And he's been having some challenges with the new property manager. He's been feeling really frustrated, stressed out, and resentful. And so he would talk to me about it. Now, I live in LA, so I'm 8,000 miles away. And when I talk to my dad, I want to have great quality conversations. Well, what's happened in the last few months? 90% of our conversations have been about this situation. My sister helps him in the business. So the three of us are involved in this situation, and the stress has really affected all of us. And so what would happen is I would speak to my dad, "Hey dad, how's it going?" And I would connect. And then I would ask the question, "How's it going with this situation?" And that's where he would start. I would notice his tone would pick up, the volume would pick up, the energy behind the words would pick up. And then he would say, "Oh, yeah, she did this now, and then she did that, and what we need to do is this, da-da-da-da," and he'll keep going. And somewhere as he's risen, his temperature, if you like, I found a way to come in and say, "So have you tried this? Or could she mean that? What else could she mean?" And he would hear that and see that and continue going up, repeating himself, getting more mad. So what I had done, I had given myself permission to be the consultant for my dad. Unbeknownst to him, I was trying to solve the problem for him, where perhaps he just needed me to listen and hold space. So he was feeling unsafe. And he would pick up in his tone, in his energy, and his frustration, and I wouldn't see that. And I would just continue on. That's what I mean by putting my foot on the pedestal and keep going, even though I've seen that things ain't working right now. And so what I've learned throughout many conversations, you can imagine, we've had many conversations, my sister, my dad, and I, in the last few months about this issue, which has been resolved, by the way. But in those conversations, I've learned that I'd like to create a cueing system, a mechanism, a strategy for me and to notice what's happening with him. So with him, now I pay attention to his breathing on the phone, to the words that he uses, to the energy, to whether he's repeating his points. And as soon as I see that, I say to him, "Dad, you're getting excited." And he says, "Am I?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're getting excited. Let's just take a moment." Okay. So what he's doing is he's stepping away from the content of the conversation and he's paying attention to how we're talking to each other. And it works with him because that cueing word that you use with the other person has to work for them. So he responds to when I say, "Dad, you're getting a little bit excited." For example, I don't like it when at home my husband may cue me and say something like, "Take a breath." I don't respond well to that. What I respond to is, I can hear you. I can see you're upset. This must be hard. Let's take a moment. Or a touch on the hand. That's what I respond to. So the cueing mechanism needs to work for the other person. I also call myself out. So the other day I caught myself because it was towards the end of these conversations about this realtor and property manager that I found myself getting the rise. I felt it. I felt the frustration bubbling up. I felt my neck tingling along here. And my breathing was becoming more shallow. And this time I chose to listen to it. Because that's what our bodies do. They're telling us that things ain't going so well, stop and pay attention. So what I do is I said to Dad, I'm feeling the rise, just give me a moment. And he kind of just went, oh, okay, we're trying this new approach. And it's worked brilliantly for both of us because we end up going back into dialogue and continuing the conversation. That is successful for both of us. And so learning to look for signs of silence or violence throughout the whole conversation is our responsibility. And we want to make sure that we do this throughout. So when I say something, I want to see how that lands. And then what happens next, and then what happens next, and what happens next. And so that takes being present. I can't be thinking about my pet at home or what I had for lunch or the email I need to get to or the meeting that's happening and what I'm going to say next if I'm in a conversation. And you and I do that. So it takes presence to notice these signs. It's like being in the watchtower. You're getting your binoculars really sharpened so you can see what's happening in a conversation. And you notice it, step back in, use the safety skills. Another example, years ago, I was working with this financial organization, and I had about 7 people with them for 2 days. And the first day went great. Their manager wasn't in the room. She had organized the whole thing, and then I was with them. They went out to dinner because they didn't really know each other. They had flown in from different regions. The second day, I noticed in the morning that literally one of them, who seemed to be engaged the day before, is swinging in his chair and looking out towards the window. And this is the Sydney Opera House, so it's a nice view. But it wasn't one of those like, oh, yeah, good view. He was actually doing it a lot, overtly. And I thought, okay. Stayed with that, and I noticed that the responses from the audience was not as much either, so people weren't responding back. And so I did something that was quite nerve-wracking. I stopped the workshop, and I asked the question, I said, I'm noticing these things going on, what's happening? And one of them said, who was the more extroverted type, he said, we don't need this stuff. This is useless. We don't want it. This is not what we need. We need something else. You can imagine at that point what's going on with me. It was like a cold water coming down my spine, and I'm feeling, am I in the wrong room? Is this the wrong program? Was the briefing wrong? What's happening? And so I managed to breathe, and I said, well, this is for you, because I took a moment to really realize, what do I want here? It's about them. And I said, so what do you want? The next 10, 15 minutes we explored, and I wrote all their answers on a whiteboard. And it turned out that their issue was with actually their manager. They didn't really trust her. They were unhappy with the way she had brought in this initiative. The good news is, though, that what they were expecting to see, because I said, what do you want? And when they expressed it, it matched 90% to what I had planned for my day. So that was the good thing. And we got back into dialogue. Our workshop went on, and we had a great day, and they became some of my strongest advocates. So whenever I would go into the lobby of this bank for another gig, if I saw one of them go, hey, Salomeh, I'm like, hi, and the handshakes were firm, the eye contact was good. And I realized at that moment, by just stopping and paying attention to the safety in the room, I managed to bring dialogue back, and we all felt good about saying what we needed to say. And so it worked. Learn to look for signs of silence and violence early on in the conversation or throughout. The whole ebb and flow of crucial conversations is a critical skill. And you know, crucial conversations tend to be uncomfortable and difficult. Can we make life a little bit easier on each other by perhaps paying attention, noticing with our loved ones at home when we're talking to them and it's turned crucial, or when at work or community, could we notice when 2 elements have left the room? The honesty, the candor, the candid, and the care, the respect, and the kindness. Because we want both of those. Can we step back and notice how these are going and take a temperature check of the conversation throughout so that we can bring life back into the conversation and get into dialogue. Thank you.